This World War III scenario seems to be escalating, and European countries are taking notice. And in fact, Sweden just released a pamphlet for its citizenry titled "In Case of Crisis or War." And there's a lot of information in the pamphlet that I felt like sharing with you all, so you don't necessarily have to go through and read it yourselves, but there are some tidbits there regarding preparedness for a wartime scenario that you might be interested in. And of course, the way Sweden is approaching this is much different than what we experience here in the US. So I thought that some of this information might be applicable to your planning. Now, of course, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can make videos like this. Even though it has nothing to do with any of the products they sell, they just want Americans to get better prepared. And of course, they do have products that can help you get better prepared. So a big thanks to Midway USA. Now, this was distributed to every household in Sweden. So everyone who lives there has access to this information. This is obviously not something we're seeing in the United States, but with recent rhetoric coming out of Russia, the idea of war or nuclear war is becoming increasingly more concerning. So, here are the parts of the pamphlet that I think are relevant to what you may find interesting for your personal preparedness. The first is what their main threat concerns are. And I think that's something that is good to demonstrate what it is you should be worried about for yourself in case there is ever a wartime scenario in your area. And maybe you're in the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, wherever you're watching from, this applies to you as well. So first off, their main threat concern is war, for obvious reasons. That's the ultimate threat for them, and of course it's the ultimate threat for just about everybody on the planet. Now, Sweden actually has a doctrine that you should be aware of because they want to make sure their citizens are completely aware of the fact that they will not surrender during a war. So if they're told that they're going to be surrendering or anything along those lines, that it's false. And the quote is exactly, "If Sweden is attacked, we will never surrender. Any suggestion to the contrary is false." So, and yes, I do have some notes over here because this is a very lengthy pamphlet that I did not memorize. I apologize. But if you can memorize entire pamphlets, and hit the subscribe button below because I'm not one of you, but I like having you around. Now, the other events that they're very concerned about in the sense of threats are going to be extreme weather events, dangerous pathogens, outages across IT systems, and organized crime. So, all those things are concerns that Sweden has for its citizenry, and all those things are reasons for why they're trying to tell their people to be better prepared. And of course, especially when it comes to the IT outages, that could be huge here in the US, where we know a lot of our infrastructure has been infiltrated, and we know people are highly dependent on IT systems for their daily lives, which obviously, if they shut off suddenly, creates a lot of chaos and panic. So, definitely something worth considering, and the organized crime aspect is a very big deal as well, because of course here in the US, we have drug cartels and all types of criminal organizations that are starting to create more instability. Now, what else is in this pamphlet? So they have a defense structure there. We're going to call this section Swedish defense structure. They have military, civil, and NATO. So when I say that, what I mean is that they obviously have their military defenses. Then they have their civil defense systems that they rely on when it comes to the citizenry or the population. And the fact that they're a NATO ally now also adds into their trifecta of their defense structure. So what is civil defense from their point of view, though? And this is something that I think you should be considering because we don't really have these programs anymore here in the US, thanks to FEMA back in, I believe, 1993. So, great times. But civil defense applies to everyone in Sweden. From 16 to 70 years old, you're required to serve in the event of a war. Now, here's the part where I think people might be slightly misguided about how modern warfare works, but we're seeing it happen in Ukraine right now, so this is good information for you to digest and consider if you ever find yourself in a wartime scenario. Here's what they say about if they happen to be in a heightened state of alert, okay? During a heightened state of alert, go to work as usual unless you're assigned a specific wartime posting. So even if you're in a World War III scenario with Russia or China, who knows who else, right? You're probably still going to go to work. Your country's probably going to tell you to go to work, especially if you're an essential worker. And then they'll decide if they need you somewhere else. But in the meantime, even though things might be exploding all around you, you better get to work. And that's what Ukrainians are doing every single day. So you should be aware of the fact that that will be a requirement, most likely even during an all-out war, okay? Now, like I said, civil defense isn't what it used to be here in the US, but maybe we could bring that back. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's a good idea, because where I live, which is a strategic nuclear target, North Dakota, I would like to have fallout shelters available once again. Now, what's a heightened state of alert? Because obviously what we just talked about was during one you would still go to work. Well, a heightened state of alert is where the Swedish government might issue a heightened state of alert in the event of a war or the threat of a war. And this will be announced on TV, radio, and smartphones. And of course, what this does is basically says everybody has to get to their posts or just continue life as usual with the awareness that things can escalate quickly and might change. And so you need to be checking in with all of your verified resources. Now, they have emergency alarm signals in Sweden as well. And an emergency alarm signal basically says that Sweden is in a state of war or imminently threatened with conflict. And at that point in time, the entire defense mobilizes. And that means literally everyone. And that happens immediately, and everyone must prepare for war in the entire country. The country is at its highest state of alert if the emergency alarm signals. So at that point in time, it's go for everyone. Anyone 16 to 70, right? Now, here's some other interesting information in there that I thought was relevant to your preparedness, regardless of where you live and whether or not you're in Sweden or not. And the reason I wanted to tell you about the civil defense aspect of Sweden is just so you can compare it to your country's current situation, because a lot of us are lacking in that department. Now, they have a whole section on seeking shelter during an air raid. And then they have a rating system of from worst to best protection based on more common structures. And I thought that was interesting too, to give you an idea of where you might have to hide if something was happening in your area. So first off, from worst to best. So the worst is going to be outside in a pit or a ditch. So if you're outside and there's nothing else around you at all, get in a ditch or a pit or basically somewhere that is like a hole, right? And do your best to get as low to the ground as possible. Very similar to the advice you get for a tornado. Next is going to be in a tunnel or next to a wall. So you're basically just trying to cut off as much exposure as you have. So you can get up against a wall or under a tunnel. It's going to help more than nothing, but it's still not great. After that comes to indoors in a room without windows. Now, also very much like a tornado, right? Going into your bathroom, making sure there's no windows in there, and just trying to get as much between you and the outside as humanly possible. They also then say, next on the list is going to be cellars, garages, or below ground metro stations. Which makes a lot of sense because that's where things are underground. So now you're starting to be very well protected from whatever could be dropping out of the sky. Because remember, this is seeking shelter during an air raid. And then finally, the best place to go is a civil defense shelter because it's specifically designed to be a bomb shelter and in many cases a fallout shelter as well. And of course, we don't have those. We used to have those here in the US. We don't anymore. And even the ones that still exist are either privately owned or they haven't been maintained and they're not accessible. So they don't really count. We might want to revive that program at some point because everybody else in the whole world thinks it's a good idea. So maybe it is. Anyway, the next section, or another section within this pamphlet, because we're not going to go every single one, but we're going to talk about the ones that are, relevant to us when it comes to being better prepared, is called home preparedness. Now, this section, I don't feel the need to go over with you because it's all the basics of prepping. It talks about food, it talks about water, it talks about medication, it talks about heating, it talks about everything that you need during a preparedness scenario. It even talks about, how to deal with using the bathroom. So I'll put a link in the description as well as in the pinned comment to this particular pamphlet so you can look all that over if you'd like, but most of you are probably going to be pretty squared away with a lot of these things, or at least already understand the concepts. So I didn't think it was necessary to go over every single individual piece of advice there because it's the basics, but it's still in there, which is still beneficial. Now, there is a section on psychological defense, and I found that to be interesting as well. Now, the whole point of that section is to say that adversaries will try to sow mistrust and erode the will of the people to defend themselves. And that's probably true. And so during a war, you have to anticipate that the information you're getting from online sources could be tampered with or could be inorganically created to create an emotional response for you. And so that's something that you have to be hyper aware of during these wartime scenarios. They want you to feel like you're already defeated. They don't want you to feel like there's a reason to put up any resistance. They don't want you to feel like you could survive anyway, right? So they're going to try to break you down with whatever means they can. And that's something that you should be highly vigilant about because, you want to survive and you may want to defend your country. So these are things to consider. Now, I do also want to say that this is the new gas mask from Mira Safety, the C21. And it's pretty cool, actually. It just released. So I'll have a link to Mira Safety with a discount code in the description as well as in the pinned comment as well, in case you're looking to get a little bit more prepared for a possible nuclear, biological, or chemical scenario. This new gas mask is top of the line and definitely has some interesting features. But there will be an actual review on this in the future. I just wanted to kind of showcase it because, yeah, it's pretty cool, honestly. So next in the pamphlet, they warn people about digital security. Now, this makes a lot of sense, but I just wanted to reiterate it because I think it's important for us here in this prepper sphere to be aware of these things so that way you don't make mistakes during a wartime scenario. So they want you to enhance your online security. So expect a heightened level of attacks coming at you from scams or from phishing scams or any other type of malware that might be being sent to you. And they just want you to be safe, make stronger passwords, don't open crazy emails, and also perform backups of your system so you don't lose any important data, especially if you have a lot of legal paperwork, or you have all of your family's information, everything else stored on your computer. You should probably have backups for that just in case. So that's something else that they're bringing to the table, which I think is a reasonable thing to consider. Now, another thing they talk about is terror attacks. I think we know here in the US there's a high propensity that during any type of wartime scenario, there may be terror attacks associated with said scenario. The reason for that is because we have sleeper cells here in the country who align themselves with other countries that are currently allied with countries like Russia and China and all these other adversaries. So here's what they say in this pamphlet from Sweden about terror attacks, okay? You have to do the usual stuff. First you run, and if you can't run, then you hide, and if you can't be sure that your hiding is going to work, you still need to tell somebody. So they want you to call, 911 or whatever your emergency services is going to be to report the fact that an attack is happening once you've gotten yourself to safety or in some degree of safety or in a situation where there is no safety. But here's one thing that I think was very interesting in that section that you should definitely keep in mind during these scenarios, okay? So just to build some context for this concept, a terror attack is happening, and let's say it is at a football stadium, and you know that one of your family members is at that football game when this is happening, okay? Think about that when I read this part to you, okay? And I'm gonna read it because I don't want to screw it up. Don't call anyone who may be in danger. You might reveal their hiding place. And that is something that I think you should definitely be considering during these mass scale attacks. Because you might be worried saying, oh my gosh, my brother is at this football game. I got to call him to make sure he's okay. You might be the reason why your brother never comes back home. Because he might be hiding and might be well hidden, but didn't think to turn off the ringer of his cell phone during that chaos. And you calling to see if he's okay might be what makes somebody realize he's there. So I just wanted to read that to you because I thought that was pretty good advice and something you should really be thinking about during these scenarios. You can't just make immediate reactions to everything. You can't panic. You have to take it easy, take it slow, and realize, okay, I'm about to try to contact this person. What are the possible repercussions of doing so? And then decide whether or not the risk is worth the reward, right? So just considerations to make, but I thought it was a good thing to consider. And we're going to say consider one more time because I really like that word apparently. Now, another section in here that a lot of people will appreciate because it's often left out and something that's overlooked quite often, and I think people would, consider these animals to be part of their family, is a whole section on pets, and it's called If You Have Pets. So, I think we all know what to do when it comes to pets, but there was some things in here I just wanted to mention to give you some concepts to, consider, which I'm saying again. So, if you have pets, keep additional food and water storage containers in your home for their food and water. So obviously if you're prepping water, you already know you should be doing that, but do you have enough water for your pets as well? That's something to consider. And do you have enough food for them on hand to get through an emergency? How long could you last without restocking their food? Now obviously certain types of pet food actually spoil pretty quickly because of the high fat content. So these are things you have to consider. You can't just buy 20 bags of dog food and expect them to last throughout a year. But at the same time, you want to at least have some on hand that you won't have to go to a store for quite a while during an emergency. So that's a consideration to make. They also say have a way to transport your pet. So you either need to have a crate or a kennel or something along those lines, so that way if you do need to go to a shelter where pets are allowed, you can do that while having your pet contained to some degree. So that was something else I thought was interesting. And they also said to make sure your pets have, your name and your number somewhere on them if possible. So obviously like on a collar or something along those lines is a good idea just in case you get separated. I know that seems kind of crazy to think about in case you're evacuating due to a wartime scenario, but pets are family and people care about their pets. So I thought it was interesting that they put it in the pamphlet. Now, here's something else that I thought was great in this pamphlet that I think a lot of us are very good at, and I think is the best part of this community, to be completely honest with you. If you are worried, they put a whole section in there about the anxiety of dealing with a wartime scenario and how to talk to your children and how to do a lot of other stuff regarding, maintaining a level of calm during such a chaotic situation. But in that section, they said this, and I thought this was very good, and I also think that it is true. Help others improve their preparedness. It gives you purpose. And I agree with that because I know that by doing what I do, I feel like I have a purpose to a degree of helping others get prepared, but I also become more prepared myself, which has basically given me less to be concerned about or worried about during a major large-scale event. And so I agree with that. So if you can help people in your inner circle get better prepared, please try to do so. It will help out not just them, but also you. And I think that this was great advice, and I think this was a great way to end my understanding of what this pamphlet had that could relate to what you have going on. Now, of course, there's more in the pamphlet. Like I said, I have the link in the description as well as in the pinned comment. I definitely recommend you checking it out, not because you live in Sweden and not because everything in there is applicable to what you have going on in your area, but because there are some ideas and concepts in there that are worth considering, and because of the fact that there are some things they do in Sweden that maybe we should be doing here. And if you agree that we should, get the U.S. civil defense restarted and kind of move civilians back into supporting the efforts of what the country needs during these wartime scenarios, then let me know in the comments below, because it's something that I would like to see restarted because I don't see anything really happening in that regard. And guess what? FEMA, who used to manage the U.S. civil defense, the ones who got rid of it, aren't doing very good at their job in general. So why not let us have the other part back that you guys let go of anyway? I don't know, just my thoughts. Anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. There's tons of stuff there, including discount codes and ways to network, like a Discord server that's free. Check that out. And anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. Did I just glitch in the Matrix? That's going to be it for Magic Prepper.